Howdy folks, it's Angel the Hunting Gear Guy, and this is a Soviet Mosin Nagant M44. It's just like an M38, except it's got a side-folding bayonet, and compared to a regular Mosin, it's chopped a little bit shorter, so it's got like a 20-inch barrel instead of a 28 or a 30-inch barrel. So nice and short and compact, still chambered in 7.62 by 54, but otherwise very little is changed. These were made in World War II, right towards the end. So like the M38 was designed in 38, M44 was 44 and on. Although some other countries continued making these past World War II, much past World War II, for the Soviets, they were quickly on to the SKS and the AK-47, which are semi-automatics and just flat out better. Like this thing had its design origins in the late 1800s. Cartridge is out of date, design was out of date, so they needed to do something to update it. And this was just really a stopgap measure until they could get onto something better. So before we get too close to taking a look into this thing, you can see that my chamber's empty and my magazine is empty. So let's take a closer look. All right, starting from the rear, this is actually a laminate stock Mosin. They weren't all laminate, but you can see those layers in there. So that would make a stronger stock that would be less likely to warp with weathering and that kind of thing, with wet weather, moisture, that kind of thing. We've got like a stamped steel butt plate here. No trapdoor in the back for cleaning kits or anything like that. Those would go on the belt. And that's held on to this stock. You can see that like inletting and that kind of thing is rough. But again, this particular rifle is a 1945. So you could be forgiven if there's a couple things that are a little bit rough. Some of these have metal, some of them don't. Some of them have a nice little brass thing. It really varies based on the rifle. One thing that's kind of characteristic of the Mosins, they have a very thick wrist stock here. You're not going to break this stock. You could probably use it as a hammer and it would still be fine. Now getting up to the action, the action on the Mosin is very simple. It's got a non-turned bolt. Sniper versions will have a turned down bolt. This one just has a very stubby little short straight bolt on it. Safety's at the rear here. To engage your safety, you pull it back and over like that. That's in safe. Now the weapon won't fire. And again, you saw me check that chamber. There's nothing inside here. And if you want to take it off safe, you have to pull it out. It takes considerable force to do this. I'm not sure how effective using this safety is, but it's there if you want it. You can load this thing using the stripper clip guide here. So that's where you would pop that stripper clip in, and you can strip the rounds into the fixed magazine here. Now, the stripper clips kind of suck. They're not as nice to use as like an SKS or something like that, but they are kind of usable. Fitting them in one by one is a little bit easier than trying to get them off the stripper clip, but again, the stripper clip is a lot faster. Now, if you need to dump your rounds out, there's a little button here at the bottom, and that button allows you to release this hinged floor plate. So that'll come off, and you can clear your rounds out. And if you really need to, you can just pull it out like that. So when we pinch it, it actually kind of opens up the little happy face there. Hey, give me some rounds. Give me some 7.62 by 54. And it just grabs onto that guy right there. So very easy to use, very easy to pop back in as well. Now, trigger pull is going to vary on these things. You can see this is empty. My chamber's empty, so I'm okay to dry fire this thing. Let's go ahead and grab our Lyman trigger scale, and let's do a couple of trigger pulls on this thing. So we hit ready, we wait for it, and then we're just going to pull. Now, this is going to be a little bit off camera, but I'll bring it back in just a minute. That was just over 5 pounds, and that's pretty typical for this thing. It's right around a 5-pound trigger pull. There are a couple of things you can do to improve the triggers on Mosins. Iraqi veteran 8888, 48s, I don't know. He's got a video on how you can improve them if you're handy and you don't mind. Well, you're not going to void your warranty on this thing, but but if you want to try that out, it's got a fairly easy trigger to work on. Now, moving a little bit closer here, this rear sight is nice and easy to use. Just pinch from the sides and zip it up to the distance you're shooting at. So there I'm shooting at 100. I can go up to 200, 300, 400, etc. It's nice and easy to use. These are a little bit hard to read in the dark. So if you, I don't know, if you do a lot of night shooting, I guess you could use like a white wax pencil or something like that to fill those letters in and then wipe it off so you get just the white in there. That's one thing that people do, but it's a very easy to use rear sight. Now while we're here, let's take a look at this side bayonet, and if you notice there, you can see that it kind of pokes out a little bit. Now this as you're getting your left hand, it does kind of like drag a little bit, and it can scrape your hand. I don't know if you really care. You could hold it a little bit further forward if that becomes an issue, or you could just leave the bayonet out when you're shooting it, and that gets it right out of the way. Now the bayonet is designed very similarly to the SKS bayonet of this same time period, where you grab this sleeve, pull the bayonet over, try not to stab your camera, and then slap it down, and it engages and it grabs right over top of the muzzle there. So you can see that it's got a very sturdy connection. We're connected at the rear, we're connected right here as well. This bayonet is very sturdy on here. Now to put the bayonet back in its stowed position, we pull this guy out, flip it over, and it snaps back into place, and we're off. Just below the bayonet, we have our cleaning rod, and this is turned in to lock in, so it's actually screwed into something back there, and to remove it, we'd need to twist it out and pull it out of here. The front sight is a simple hooded sight. It's got a little hole in the top there so that you can install and adjust it, and we can see what it looks like there, and that would be matching up with just a plain blade kind of rear notch. For our sling, what we're going to be using is, these are called dog collars, and they're just a little kind of buckled collar that you pop onto the little sling cutout that then holds on to the sling. It's actually kind of quiet, which is something that I like, because metal on metal kind of clangs and makes a lot of noise, whereas this fabric on fabric is more or less like a lot quieter than a steel attach point would be. Let's disassemble our Mosin. First thing, anytime we're disassembling, whether an M44 or any other gun really, chamber's empty, mag's empty. Always check that. To remove the bolt from the rifle, we press down the trigger. That will let us take out the bolt. We'll get back to this later. Next, we need to remove this screw here. Make sure you've got a bit that fits that very well, and then just loosen that guy out of there. That's this one right here. While we're down here, we might as well grab the magazine follower and spring. You can see it's very easy to pull out. Next, flip it over, and we see we've got another flathead screw right there, so we can go ahead and remove that guy. And you can see that that is a longer screw at the rear. Now we should be able to pull this this bottom metal out. So there's our mag well and trigger guard and all that kind of jazz right in there. Next, we'll have to pull these barrel bands off, so I'm just going to take that bayonet and get it out of the way. I'll remove our dog collar sling. And then we've got these barrel bands and these little keepers here. So if you press those in, you should be able to wiggle these. Oh boy, this one's tight. Some of these are going to be really tight, so just carefully ease them off. All right, I got my front barrel band off. Now I need to pull off the rear one. And with both my barrel bands over here, I can take that top part off. And now I can remove the action from the stock. And if you're curious, there's the metal piece that the cleaning rod is screwing into. So if I screw in the cleaning rod, that's the metal bit that I'm screwing it into to secure it. Now on the mag well, there's not really much to, well, anything really to clean here. I mean, if you've got a brand new one of these in the Cosmoline, you'll want to clean these channels in here and just get that Cosmoline out. But as you can see, this one is fairly well cleaned. So no need to do anything there. With our follower and magazine spring, again, if there was any Cosmoline, we need to clean that. Not really necessary here. If I wanted to disassemble this bayonet further, I could pull this screw out and pull this whole thing out. I'm not going to do that on camera just because it's not super interesting, but that's something that you can do as well. And we can take a look at this rifle stripped down. You can see how simple the trigger mechanism is. And this is actually where you can do a trigger job. So if we pull this screw off here, we'll be able to get into the trigger. I'm not going to actually do a trigger job on it. I'm just showing you guys where that is. There's our interrupter. Sometimes there can be issues with the interrupter not interrupting properly, in which case you'll get rim lock, which I have had on this rifle. There are some things you can do to tweak these as well. The screw that holds it on is just over there. Now, just in case any of you were curious how this trigger setup was, you can see that it's kind of being held in there. but I have taken this little screw out. Next, I can just push this pin out here. And that'll let me get the whole shebang out. So that's our trigger, and this is the bits that you would adjust if you wanted to make your trigger job. To reinstall, just pop them in place, get that pin, push it in from the one side. Let's go ahead and disassemble our bolt. The first thing we're going to need to do is to decock it. So you can see it's kind of up on an edge there. So if we pull this guy and turn it over, we're releasing some of the tension in there. We're also making it so that some of the stuff can come off. Bolt head comes off. This bar comes off. And now we can... And then now we need to unscrew this thing from the back. And one of the tricks here is that this guy can actually be used to kind of hold on here and then to unscrew it out. So you can turn it, and it's holding on the firing pin. As you can see there, it is slowly unscrewing there. So just keep going, and it'll release. Make sure you've got a hand on it because there's still some spring pressure there. And we can remove the firing pin and firing pin spring, and there's really nothing holding us back on here. When you clean your bolt, I would really recommend using some pipe cleaner because that can get into some funny spots like inside the firing pin channel, around your bolt face and that kind of thing. Just ensure that you get into all the little channels to give her a nice clean. To reassemble, what we're going to do is pop this kind of like that, and then put our firing pin spring on. Now we're going to have to press and turn at the same time until we feel it catch those threads. You don't want it to like press in, just catch like half a thread and then rip it out. So make sure you're pressing in hard as you're turning it, and you'll start to catch the threads in here. So I'm just going to keep turning this firing pin into the bolt. And what I'm looking for is basically for that firing pin to be flush and for the strikes to match up here. Once it starts getting hard, you can start using this, and that'll just make it a little bit easier to screw the bolt in. And you can see there, I can move it. This is looking a little bit proud. Let me just take it a half turn out. And there it is flush. And I'm just going to turn it a little bit more just to get that strike perfectly lined up. Next, I'm going to take this piece here and pop it on. Now this is kind of easy because this part here has to match up with there. So I just put it in there, and it should just go in like that. All right, with this bolt, what I need is that nub to go in right there. So what I'm going to do is get it like that, and then just pop it in right there. So it's kind of being held in place lightly. Then I'll need to pull back on this one and turn. And then what I'm looking for, as it turns, the bolt should match up right here. Now the bolt feels like it doesn't want to go anywhere. This doesn't want to go anywhere. And I'm good to put this back in the rifle. Next, I'll need to recock the action, and to do that, I'm just going to hang on to this bolt here, and I'm going to pull this part back and then turn it so that it's locked on there. And you can see that it's kind of sitting nice enough on where it should be. Next, I can take my stock and my action and feed the trigger through. I'm making sure that my barrel bands are nice up and high on there, and I've got my action on my receiver again. Now I can take that magazine and trigger assembly, get it through the trigger there, pop it in place, get my nice long bolt right there, and it's going to go right in the rear right there. I can carefully put it back together. Short little screw goes up front, bolt goes in. As we're pressing it in, we're pressing the trigger so that it'll let it pass. Now it's in. Upper handguard cover goes on the upper handguard. All right, I pulled the cleaning rod off to make the next part a little bit easier. Next, my barrel bands are going to go on. They always have the join at the bottom. So if you remember that, it should be easy enough to get them on. And they just kind of click on past the little doohickey there. Need to turn that one. And they just clip right in. Finally, let's get our cleaning rod back in place. And let's screw it into that metal part that we looked at earlier. Next, let's get that dog collar through the spot for the sling there, through the loop. Dog collar's on. Take the bayonet, pop it down. Keep your fingers out of the way. Next, we'll need to function test the rifle to make sure that we've done everything correctly. So I'm going to take a look. I am empty here. I check the firing pin. I check the safety. Oh my God, what a terrible safety. And safety's working as well. So this rifle is back to functioning order. So who should get an M44? They're pretty expensive. So with a lot of milsurps in the past, I've talked a lot about their utility as they've been fairly inexpensive, especially a lot of the red rifles. Not the M44s. These things are right around $900 right now in Canada. So they're kind of pricey. This puts them out of the utility range and more into the collector range. So if you want one of these things, you're going to want one of them. You're not going to ever buy one of these because they're cheap, and you might as well have one because they shoot cheap ammo, because it's a $900 gun. And for hunting, there's better guns. For competition, there's better guns, and there's better guns for cheaper. So you wouldn't want to use them for anything like that. Even if you wanted a short Mosin, the M38s are still cheaper than this guy. But if you want something that is one of the more modernized versions of the Mosin, the most modern version of the Mosin, something that's going to have some collector value going forward into the future, something that still shoots like a pretty decent round, something that'll give you some fireballs if you shoot it at night, because when you shoot ammo that's made for a 28 or 30-inch barrel out of a 20-inch barrel, boy, you get some fireballs out of this thing. And they are fun for that. This particular model is actually one of the best Mosins I've ever shot, simply because the bolt on it was just very smooth. I find a lot of Mosins, you got to like whack them to get the bolt open after you fire. This one, not at all. Very nice, very well behaved, accurate enough with the iron sights, and really fun to shoot. So if you get your chance to pick up one of these things for a decent price, I would definitely jump on one of the M44s. Thanks for watching.